is Onelife Initiative. So he's here on behalf of Onelife Initiative and the Child Protection Network, a network of organizations concerned with the protection of children's rights around here. Mr. Fagorusi, it's good to have you around with us today on Midweek Ride.
All right, thank you for having me in the studio.
Thank you very much for coming. Now, I want to talk about female genital mutilation. February 6th is the day of zero tolerance for female genital mutilation. Now, we'll talk about female genital mutilation. It's also called female circumcision in some quarters, I believe. What, in the actual sense, is female genital mutilation?
Okay, first and foremost, even though people call this female circumcision, we try to make them understand that what really happens is not circumcision. There's that tendency to want to equate it with male circumcision, but what happens is that there's a damage, there's a mutilation, and so that's why you have, in several quarters, people say female genital mutilation or female genital cutting. And this, according to the World Health Organization, refers to, all procedures that includes the partial or total removal of all, or just some part of the external female genitalia for, cultural or non-medical reasons. And over the years, we have seen evidences that this has no medical benefits, no medical, health benefits for the girl child or for the woman. And it's in 4 variants, what we call type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Depending on exactly, where it is done, depending on what is done, that's how we come about the 4 classification. And one of the things we always like to say is that, look, if we talk about this, it looks like there is no standard for this. So it looks like someone in XY community cuts in a particular way, and then that gave birth to those variants called type 1. Type 1 includes when you talk about nicking the clitoris, cutting all the entire clitoris away or just part of it. That's what we have as type 1. Type 2 talks about the fact that the clitoris is nicked, the clitoris is totally removed, and then part of the labia minora is also removed, and maybe just part of the labia minora is removed. And then we have type 3, which is the what we call infibulation, where you actually remove the clitoris, the labia minora, the labia majora, and then you have a stitch, just leaving a little opening for urination. And we've also seen this variant common in some locations in the country here. And then type 4 is any other thing you do to the external female genitalia apart from what I just described in type 1, type 2, type 3. So in the eastern part of the country, for example, type 4 is also prevalent, where you have what we call massaging of the clitoris. People massage the clitoris over a period of time, hoping to numb the clitoris. So type 4 is popular in some parts of the country, and then for our own part here, where you have your state, the southwestern parts, you have the type 1 and type 2 variant pretty popular around here.
All right. So no health benefits, it only causes harm, even according to World Health Organization. Now, let's talk about social aspects. Why do people engage in the female genital mutilation?
Okay, so people engage in female genital mutilation out of very huge, love for their children. Huge love also, mixed with very massive ignorance. Because again, remember that the people who actually, take their children for this practice are parents. They are doing it because they think they are trying to protect the girl child. They are trying to make sure that the girl child is not sexually deviant. They do it because, several reasons. Some will tell you, for example, that if it's not done, that child will not be able to be a child in the future. Some will tell you that if you don't do it, on that child, when she grows up, she'll become promiscuous. Some will tell you if you don't do it during delivery, if the head of the child touches the clitoris, that child will die, right? And if you ask medical, professionals, they'll tell you that there's no way during the process of delivery that the head of the child even touches the clitoris in the first place. Some will tell you that they do it because, it's our culture, it's our tradition. But what we always say to this is that, look, the culture of any group of individuals is a culmination of their civilization, right? So what used to be cultural for us here in Ibadan is no longer cultural, right? Because over a period of time, we also know that culture is not static, it is pretty dynamic. It changes. There was no culture, at any point in time where someone said, look, if I needed to reach out to someone in Lagos, I have to call the person in Lagos. Technology, globalization, interaction, all of this dynamism tends to actually impact on who we are eventually. So we say that, look, This is also not the first time when we're talking about a harmful traditional practice. Before now, we used to talk about parts of the country where killing of twins was a practice. Before now, you see people force feed a child, right? You hold the child and then you begin to, force feed that child. We have seen children who actually died, from that practice. When women give birth at some point, you have people pick a lantern, put a rag on top of it, to massage the navel of that child. But on the same side, we have the harmful traditional practice. We also have beneficial traditional practices. So this is not really about an affront on people's culture. Yes, we know that people hold very dearly to their culture, but what we've also seen is that, look, this is not just Onelife initiative or the Child Protection Network saying that we need to stop female genital mutilation. We're talking of global best practices when it comes to healthcare. We didn't just wake up and say we should all start putting on nose masks, right? The World Health Organization said that, look, it's a pandemic. It has moved from being an epidemic. Right now we have a pandemic. This is what we should do. We had the same recommendation for Lassa fever, for Ebola fever, for the control of acute flaccid paralysis in children, for the control of even, malaria, right? And say, look, clean your environment, use mosquito net. So it's the same global body, a body of professionals in the healthcare space who have said over the years that, look, we found out that cutting the clitoris of a child, of a girl child, of a woman, has no medical benefit whatsoever, right? That a girl child is actually born perfect. So these are some of the nuances that people put on the table to say, look, these are some of the reasons why we do this, but very clearly. And we also have people who, so for example, Ogun State is known to have one of the lowest prevalence here in the southwestern part of the country.
Wow.
And it doesn't mean that a child born in Ogun State or a girl from Ogun State is more promiscuous or less promiscuous than a person than any other state. So Osun, Oyo, Ekiti, these are the states with the highest prevalence, here in the southwestern part of the country.
How about Ekiti?
Yes, Ekiti has the highest prevalence, right now.
Because I'm aware you have an office in Ekiti.
Yes, we have an office in Ekiti, considering the NDHS, the National Demographic and Health Survey report that comes out every 5 years. So currently, Ekiti is ranked as the state with the highest prevalence of female genital mutilation in Nigeria. It used to be Osun State 5 years back, but again, a lot of activities are going in there, intensification in community mobilization, trying to make sure that, look, communities actually own this, because what we've seen very clearly is that what we need to put in place is that, look, if your premise for doing this is to make sure that that child is not sexually, so morally bankrupt, so can we begin to look for other means of ensuring that we don't have sexual deviance? Or can we bring up this child properly? Do we give this child comprehensive sexuality education? Do we let this child understand that? How many parents even talk to their children about menstruation? The girl child 19, some 15, some 13, just wake up and say that, I saw blood. So it might even be the peer, in class. But in this case, where we also have men, for instance, who play major role in decision making, but when it comes to the mechanism for how female genital mutilation is done and all of that, they just make the decision and they leave the place. The recovery process is also not, majorly, men's concern. So we say that, look, how do we bring our traditional leaders, our community leaders, various, non-state actors within the community, how do we bring them to the table in a way that they understand that, look, this is our major problem and we need to address. We don't need to wait for it to become, the status of, what we currently have as COVID-19, that, look, everybody is putting some funds on the table. Nigeria is budgeting about 400 billion, to bring in vaccines. But we're saying that, look, this is also a human right violation, because technically you end the reproductive life cycle of the girl or the woman even before it starts. Because the organ there is not a vestige organ. There's a function, there's something the organ is basically there for. So we have instances in the community. We work actively in Oluyole and on our community, and we have seen several instances, a 2-year-old child, girl who actually died, because of this. Several instances like that in the community, and we don't have a system in Nigeria where you have a lot of autopsy being done so that we even know the cause. Some will say, look, Amuton Ruwani, that's how destiny has designed this. So this child is actually designed to die. So the Ololas, for example, will say that Omo Kinkulowo Nicola. The question we fail to ask is, what happens after the Nicola has left? Right? What happens after the Nicola?
Does the Nicola care if the child dies out?
So these are very predominant issues to say that, look, we need to address this from the supply side. If you do not go to the Unicola in the first place, the Unicola will not force himself or herself on you, as the case may be. So how do we get the next generation of women, the next generation of girls to actually understand that, look, you can't be passive as far as this conversation is concerned. When you have a girl child, for example, we've had to work with some clergies and let them understand that, look, when you're doing counseling for intending couple, you need to bring this subject that, oh, if you guys have a girl child, do not fall fall, prey to any peer pressure or any family pressure to actually mutilate the girl child. When the clergy also go to preach at the naming ceremony, right, you need to mention this to the hearing of the entire public to know that, look, you are not supposed to do
they
any
should
of
join
this.
in the sensitization.
They should join in this. But we have a new challenge, which is what we call medicalization of female genital mutilation, where people are beginning to say, oh, maybe it's because the Nicolas are not educated. Can we do this in the hospital? And again, you remember that, look, people who work in our primary healthcare centers, in community-based private clinics, are also members of the community who also hold on to those culture and beliefs. So when people come around to actually request for this, data says that about 12% of the female genital mutilation incidences we have in Nigeria were actually done by trained healthcare providers, right? Whether community health extension workers that we call CHUs. And if you go to several of our rural or suburban community, anybody putting on any form of white is a what? Is a doctor. Right? And they trust that, look, if I come to you, I would get better healthcare. So I'm better off not going to an Olola, right? So if it's done by a trained health professional, doesn't diminish the kind of FGM that has been done. It is still female genital mutilation, and the consequences are likely, are obviously still the same.
So even healthcare professionals should be resensitized about this.
Exactly, that's the point.
Now, we want to look at the health risks associated with female genital mutilation, but before we go into that, we wouldn't want to leave our Yoruba audience behind. So very briefly, let's get to our Yoruba audience too.
Ẹ ṣeun wo tí ẹ ti ń bá wa bọ̀ ètò ọ̀hún ó ti débi kùnkùndùn ó ti débi tí ó ti ń ní àpẹẹrẹ ẹ ti ń gbọ́ gbogbo fínrìnfínrín látòórọ̀ èmi gan ṣe mo lanúlẹ̀ tí ń lè pàdé nítorí àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ tí ń bóde lẹ́nu àlejò wa tòní náà ni ọ̀gbẹ́ni Ṣọlá Fagorosi, àwọn náà ni adarí àjọ Onelife Initiative. Ẹ ṣeun pàápàá yẹn ẹ sì jẹ́ wa o.
Ẹ ṣé gan.
Ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò Midweek Ride fún tọ̀sẹ̀ yìí. Tó àkòrí tá à ń pẹ̀kẹ́lù náà ló ní í ṣe pẹ̀lú dídábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin. Ẹ sì ti sọ̀rọ̀ púpọ̀ ṣùgbọ́n nítorí àwọn olólùfẹ́ wa tí ń gbọ́ wa lédè Yorùbá, àwọn ìyá wa ń bẹ ńlé, oníkálukú wọn ń bẹ ńlé tí wọ́n fẹ́ gbọ́ ohun tí ẹ ti ṣàlàyé yìí ní èdè abínibí wa. Ìdí nìyí tí ètò yìí fi jẹ́ elédè méjì. Kí gan là ń pè ní ká dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin? Táwọn olóyìnbó ń pè ní Female Genital Mutilation, FGM.
Ok, àwọn kan máa ń ní bí àwọn èèyàn ṣe máa ń júwe tẹ́ bá dé àwọn ibì kan, irú àpàdé èèyàn kan ní Olúyọ̀lé ní ọ̀sẹ̀ tó kọjá tó ní àwọn kì í pè ní dábẹ́, wọ́n jábẹ́ ni.
Wọ́n jábẹ́ ni.
Tẹ́ bá dé àwọn apá kan lẹ́kìtì, wọ́n ní wọ́n ń ṣẹ̀wà fọ́mọ obìnrin. Oríṣiríṣi èdè ni àwọn èèyàn ń lò láti júwe pé láti fi pọ́n bí wọ́n ṣe ń dábẹ́ fọ́mọ obìnrin. Ṣùgbọ́n àlàyé tí ó wà níbẹ̀ ni pé à ń dábẹ́ fọ́mọ obìnrin túmọ̀ sí pé ohunkóhun tí a bá ṣe sí ojú ara ọmọbìnrin tí ó yẹ pé yálà bí àtẹ̀rí àṣà tí ò ń ṣe pé àwọn onímọ̀ ìjìnlẹ̀ ara lọ́n fìdí ẹ̀ múlẹ̀ láṣẹṣe bójá ìdọ̀lagé ni o, bójá ojú ara fẹ́lẹ́ la gé ni o, gbogbo nǹkan bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn là ń pè ní pé àti dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin táwọn olóyìnbó ń pè ní female genital mutilation. Oríṣiríṣi mẹ́rin dẹ̀ ló wà. Mẹ́rin ló wà. A máa ń rí àkọ́kọ́ ni pé wọ́n kọ̀ rọra gé idọ̀ kéré, wọ́n dẹ̀ bóyá wọ́n tún fojú kan abẹ́fẹ́lẹ́ kékeré tó wà lójú ara. Ìkejì ni pé wọ́n gé idọ̀, wọ́n wá fojú kan, wọ́n á yọ abẹ́fẹ́lẹ́ kékeré tó wà ní ojú ara. Then ìkẹta, wọ́n tó wá gé abẹ́fẹ́lẹ́ ńlá tó wà lójú ara. Ìkẹta ni pé wọ́n yọ gbogbo ẹ̀ àti idọ̀ àti abẹ́fẹ́lẹ́ kékeré àti abẹ́fẹ́lẹ́ ńlá, wọ́n wá rán ojú ibẹ̀ pọ̀ tó yẹ pé kí wọ́n lè jẹ́ kí ìtọ̀ àbí kí nǹkan oṣù obìnrin kó lè máa jáde. Ìkẹrin ẹ̀ ni pé gbogbo nǹkan tá a bá ṣe yàtọ̀ sí mẹ́ta tí mo ti júwe yìí tá à ń pè ní type 1, type 2, type 3, bóyá wọ́n fi egbò, wọ́n fi ewé, wọ́n fi rọ ojú ara yẹn ni, àbí wọ́n fi abẹ́rẹ́, wọ́n sí gbẹ́rẹ́ sí lára ni o, gbogbo yẹn, àbí wọ́n fi bóyá omi gbígbóná wọ́n fi ń wọ ojú ara yẹn, nǹkan tá à ń pè ní type 4 female genital mutilation nìyẹn.
Kábíyèsí, ẹ ṣeun púpọ̀ àlejò wa ọ̀gbẹ́ni Ṣọlá Fagorosi, ẹ kú àtótónu. Wọ́n ti ń ṣe kínní láti àyébáyé. Àwọn bàbá wa, àwọn màmá wa ń ṣe, kódà wọ́n ṣe fún àwọn màmá wa, wọ́n ṣe púpọ̀. Ń gbawó gan lóde tí ò wá dáa. Tó wá jẹ́ pé ariwo ẹ̀ wá pọ̀ káàkiri pípé kí wọ́n dá dúró kí wọ́n má ṣe mọ́. Kí ló ṣẹlẹ̀, kí ló dé, kí ni ń fà ságọ́ ara?
Gẹ́gẹ́ bí a ṣe sọ pé anything tó bá jọ mọ́ àgọ́ ara wa, àwọn sáyẹ́ǹsì ni. Ó ní àwọn nǹkan tí à ń ṣe nísìnyí tí yẹ pé a kì í ṣe tẹ́lẹ̀. Tẹ́lẹ̀ ẹ lè má gbọ́ káwọn èèyàn sọ pé ẹ mu omi iye báyìí lójoojúmọ́. Bí science bá ṣe improve sí náà ni àwọn ìmọ̀ náà ṣe máa jáde sí. láti tó bí ọdún bí ogójì báyìí 20 years ogún ọdún àti tó bí ogún ọdún sì ti ẹ pé a ti ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa pé kí àwọn èèyàn dáwọ́ láti dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin Africa níbí báyìí Asia Middle East àti àwọn èèyàn wa tí ẹ pé wọ́n tún ti lọ sí òkè òkun oríṣiríṣi àti àṣẹjẹ ráwọn àpèjúwe tí ẹ pé àwọn èèyàn á gbé olóòlà láti bí báyìí wọ́n lè gbé lọ ìlú bóyá Germany right àwọn bíi family bíi mẹ́rin márùn wọ́n lọ dábẹ́ fún wọn tí wọ́n bí lọ àwọn náà bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ń rí gbogbo àpèjúwe yẹn so tẹ́ bá dé àwọn ìlú yẹn náà sí àwọn náà ti ní àwọn oríṣiríṣi government institutions tán ti dúró pé láti rí i pé kò sí àwọn èèyàn tẹ́ pé wọ́n wá tó ń wọlé wá ṣerú kan àbí tẹ́ pé wọ́n gbé ọmọ lọ àti school bá ti wà ní holiday tí wọ́n á gbé ọmọ lọ láti lọ ṣe irú nǹkan bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn so èyí tí a ti rí ni pé àwọn ìjàmbá tó ti ṣe fún ara obìnrin àwọn kan máa béèrè pé gẹ́gẹ́ bí ẹ ṣe sọ pé ṣùgbọ́n wọ́n dábẹ́ fún màmá kínní kan wọ́n dábẹ́ àmọ́ kò sí nǹkan kan tó ṣe wọ́n náà nǹkan tó ṣẹlẹ̀ ni pé ẹ lè mọ̀ pé nǹkan kan ṣe nìyẹn torí gbogbo àwọn tó wà láyìíká wọn náà bí wọ́n ṣe rí nìyẹn kò sí àpẹẹrẹ tẹ́ fẹ́ fi compare ṣọ́rọ̀ mi yìí kò sí nǹkan tẹ́ fẹ́ fi tí wáyé pé gbogbo àmì báyìí èdè Yorùbá la ń sọ tàdé fi pé Yorùbá ló yẹ ká máa sọ tá a bá rí ẹlòmíì tó ń sọ èdè míì àárò pé Yorùbá yẹn náà nìkan ló ṣe kíni o ló wà right then oríṣiríṣi nǹkan tó máa ń ṣẹlẹ̀ sí àwọn èèyàn wa ẹlòmíà ní irọ́ èèyàn bẹ́ẹ̀ nǹkan báyìí ló fà á àti rí àwọn kéèsì ẹ pé ó ṣẹlẹ̀ tí ẹ pé àwọn èèyàn pàpà kù tán ní pé ara lé ìyàwó kejì ló jẹ́ kí ọmọ ìyálé ọ̀kan ló jẹ́ kí ọmọ exactly ló jẹ́ kí ọmọ kú so kò sí nǹkan tó jọ mọ́ pé ìlera ara tó jẹ́ pé ó yẹ ká ṣe ní kọ̀rọ̀ àti ti rí pé ibi tí ẹ pé obìnrin bá fi ń lọ fún antenatal ibi tí wọ́n bá ti ń lọ fún wọ́n lọ tọ́jú ọmọ ibẹ̀ ni a ti máa ń ra àwọn nurses míì láwọn hospitals wa tí wọ́n á tún máa bá wọn sọ̀rọ̀ pé àṣé ẹ̀ ti ní dábẹ́ fún. tó jẹ́ àwọn akọ́ṣẹ́mọṣẹ́ tó jẹ́ àwọn akọ́ṣẹ́mọṣẹ́ mi ìfẹ́ dárúkọ community kò ń ṣe pé wọ́n sọ èmi fúnra mi mo lọ bẹ̀ ní Ọ̀yọ́ state ní ìbàdí tẹ́ pé ẹnìyẹn júwe pé hospital tí wọ́n ti dábẹ́ fún ọmọ mi lélẹ́yìí so we have several instances bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn tẹ́ pé à ń tọ́ láti encourage àwọn ọmọ pé a lọ sí àjíà ìkan láwọn communities wa ní ọ̀nà àràmì báyìí ni obìnrin yẹn dẹ́n sọ pé ṣé ẹ̀ ń fi dá mi lójú pé tí ìbá dábẹ́ fọ́mọ mi kò sí nǹkan kan tó máa ṣe ọmọ so a ní láti mú àwọn healthcare providers níbẹ̀ náà àtúrò àwọn healthcare providers kan náà jẹ́ pé àwọn náà òye yí wọn dáadáa tó máa ń fọwọ́ kún wọ́n pẹ̀lú tiwa náà láti make sure pé wọ́n bá àwọn èèyàn sọ̀rọ̀ pé kò sí nǹkan kan tó máa ṣe ọmọ yín bó ṣe yẹ kó rí lélẹ̀ ẹlẹ́mìí máa ní ọmọ òun yún ojú ara máa pé ọmọ tó ń ṣiṣẹ́ ní orí iyẹ̀pẹ̀ láti àárọ̀ di ìrọ̀lẹ́ báwo ni ò ṣe ní yún ojú ara we've also had a case tẹ́ pé obìnrin láti pè wá bá ṣe ń sọ̀rọ̀ lórí rédíò náà ni pé nǹkan tẹ́ ń sọ ètò tọ́ ni o ọmọ mi tí mo kọ́kọ́ bí ojú ara ẹ ti lé right nǹkan tá à ń pè ní cyst or keloid as the case may be pé ibi tí wọ́n ti dábẹ́ fún ó ti wá ṣe kí ni o ó ti lé ó dàbí egbò tó jiná ni right ó ti papọ̀ we had a case tẹ́bàdé oní center kan náà ní Ebonyi tó ń pè ní National Obstetrics and Fistula Center about 85% of the cases tó jẹ mọ́ pé obìnrin nǹkan tá à ń pè ní vertical vaginal fistula pé èèyàn ń tọ̀ tí ò lè control ẹ̀ pé wọ́n dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin ló ṣe kí ni o ló fà so oríṣiríṣi ìlera táwọn èèyàn ń bò mọ́ ara tí wọ́n gbé jáde a lè mọ̀ pé nǹkan báyìí àdèmálẹ́lómi tó wá irọ́ àṣà níbi tí ẹ ṣe kí ni o bó ṣe rí nìyẹn.
tó o ṣeun ọ̀rọ̀ yìí ní agbára púpọ̀ mo sì rò pé ara lé ẹ̀ bá wá dé bí wọ́n ti ṣe ń sọ̀hún ṣùgbọ́n àwọn tí ń ṣe nígbà wọn ó máa ní nǹkan tí wọ́n rí lọ́bẹ̀ tẹ́ ẹ̀ gàrú owó tán fi wípé àkíní ìdá kí náà rò pọ̀ tó dàbí ìwúrí tó dàbí àǹfààní táwọn rò wípé ó lè wà ń bẹ̀ tẹ́lẹ̀ tí wọ́n fi ń ṣe fáwọn ọmọbìnrin.
kí ni iṣẹ́ tí idán ṣe lára the clitoris right fún sexual pleasure ni right so if you remove it for example the assumption is that ọkùnrin nìkan ló yẹ kó gbádùn àjọṣepọ̀ ọkùnrin àti obìnrin right it's still about a similar patriarchal system pé tó bá ti yọ kúrò bẹ́ẹ̀ kò ní máa ṣèṣekúṣe kiri. Right a dẹ̀ ti rí àwọn professors wa doctors wọ́n ti ṣe research pé àwọn tó ń ṣe owó nàbì gan a rí nínú wọn several of them ti ẹ̀kún àti kìnìún tó dábẹ́ fún right ká nípa àwọn tó ń ṣe owó nàbì for example ṣe tàbí tó ń rìn gbèrègbèrè kí táwọn pé most of them wọn ò dábẹ́ fún maybe a lè máa conclude gẹ́gẹ́ bí mo sọ fún yín pé science ni nǹkan tí a bá rí oríṣiríṣi ìwádìí tí a bá ṣe la máa ń jẹ́ kó reach conclusion pé báwo la ṣe lè tún ilé ayé ṣe báwo la ṣe lè tún àwọn èèyàn tó wà ní ilé ayé báwo la ṣe lè tún ìlera ọmọbìnrin àbí ìlera àgbàlagbà obìnrin báwo la ṣe lè tún ṣe so oríṣiríṣi nǹkan tí wọ́n máa ń filẹ̀ nìyẹn pé ká make sure pé kò rìn gbèrègbèrè tá a bá dábẹ́ fún sìn abẹ́rẹ́ sí that's the major reason tí àwọn èèyàn wọn máa ń give wọ́n dẹ̀ wò pé nǹkan tó yẹ ká ṣe a ní case kan ní Kwara State that was about 3 years ago one of the politicians in the constituency tó lóun fẹ́ fún constituency òun ní gift ló bá sanwó fọ́dọ̀ là kí gbogbo wọn máa ṣe kí ni o kọ́ máa bọ̀ lọ́fẹ̀ẹ́. Right, so it took the intervention of some UN organization, UNICEF, UNFPA, to go and educate the man. But no, this is a violation of their rights. So, ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn èèyàn wa náà ni ò mọ̀, right? So gẹ́gẹ́ bí sọ pé àwọn tó ń ṣe kò kí ṣe pé wọ́n burú o, especially àwọn parents wa, wọ́n nífẹ̀ẹ́ ọmọ wọn ni, lọ́n ṣe fẹ́ ṣe pé àkọ́mọ ẹ má rìn gbèrègbèrè, kọ́mọ ẹ má dìyàn tí ẹ pé kò rí ọkọ fẹ́. Some communities will tell you that tó o bá ṣe o ò tí ì dobìnrin. Àti ní communities in Nigeria mi báyìí tẹ́ pé wọ́n á sọ pé tó o bá ṣe wọn lè tóbìnrin yẹn bá kú gan wọn lè ṣe kí ni wọn lè sin, right? Àwọn èlòmíì máa ní tó bá lóyún kó tó di pé wọ́n ṣe kí ni o kó tó di pé wọ́n dábẹ́ fún different instances tí a ti rí bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn, right? But it is majorly from ignorance. And tá a bá ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa pé wọ́n ń dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin kò kí ń ṣe pé à ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa abúlé o. Àti rí lecturer ní FCC tó náà gbé ọmọ tó gbé lọ sílé fún Christmas tó wá ní pé kí wọ́n dábẹ́ fún tí bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ń kígbe kiri lórí Twitter pé ẹgbàá mi nǹkan báyìí máa lọ́kọ́ sọ láwọn láti point ọkọ sí several literatures pé you are a lecturer in a university now, go and also read this as well. So it's not just about the rural centers, we also have people in the urban locations who hold on dearly to their culture. Culture is the totality of human behavior. You see a professor, for example, who will say, look, you can't come to my house and my daughter will not kneel down. You can't come to my place and my son will not prostrate to you. Whether he's in the country or outside of the country, that is the cultural identity. But the same way we have this very useful, beneficial culture, within, the African space, we also have very harmful cultures that also needs to stop. Some of them have stopped. Right? It's not common again. Why don't we do that again? Right? Why were they doing that before? For identity. Right? But now that you have BVN, you have NIN, you have all this, so what other identity? Right? What other identity do you want? So some of these cultures become very transient. They are very interesting cultures that we have. If a child is misbehaving in the community, another woman will rise up and talk to the child that you are also my daughter. Right? Because we have that kind of communal living. Right? So the culture clearly, like I said earlier on, it's a dynamic thing. Right? We have established very clearly you have to bring up that child normally. You have to train that child. You can't outsource parenting and hope that the child will not become a deviant. It's too simple a solution, even on the surface of it, apart from even the medical evidences.
To be effective.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Let's talk about the health risks associated with female genital mutilation. What are the complications? Medium term or short term, medium term, long term complications?
Okay, so we have quite a number of them. Some instances, you have shock. I remember we had the guest at the office then who was explaining that the only reason she was not circumcised was because she was waiting for her turn when her cousin went in. Okay. Right? And then she heard the way the cousin screamed, and then she ran away. Long and short was that cousin died. Right? So there are instances of this happening. She died from people react in different ways to different situations. That's when you hear the conversation about rape, for example, they say, and they were raping you there and you did not make any noise. Right? You did not shout. Right? And then you have another girl who would literally claw at that man's face. We had a case online recently where they said the girl even killed the guy in the course of being raped. People react differently. Right? So you can't say because person A reacted this way, what was my train of thought again? I've even forgotten what I was trying to get at.
Yes, the reaction to
so the reactions basically. So you have instances where people actually die, from that shock, right? We also have a major case of vesical vaginal fistula because you are talking about a very sensitive part of the body. Right? So what happens is that, and that's why I was saying earlier on, you have type 1, type 2, type 3, type. What is type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4? If the procedure is something very simple, you can't go to any medical school or any nursing college and then they tell you that, look, this is how to cut, a lady. There is nothing like that in the curriculum of any hospital at all. Any medical, So it means that, look, there's no doctor that can thumb chest and say, look, I am the best when it comes to circumcising the female child. No. right? So again, you also have, cases where people actually would cut the urinary tract system so the woman can no longer urinate. And then even if you do all of this, you bring it back and all of that, you do a reconstructive surgery. The psychology has also been damaged, right? You have cases where people, for example, cannot menstruate the way they should, right? You have instances, for example, where the girl will tell you that, look, I'm frigid when it comes to anything sexual relationship. I am not interested. We've seen these actually break homes as well if it's not properly managed. Right, so these are some of the, the short-term and the long-term consequences when it comes to female genital mutilation.
tó ṣeun púpọ̀ ọ̀gbẹ́ni Ṣọlá Fagurosi àwọn ewu tí ó wà nù ká máa dábẹ́ fọmọbìnrin ní ti ìlera wọn náà ni ìbéèrè tí a ń béèrè fún àwọn aráalé wa tí ń gbọ́ wa ní èdè Yorùbá ó yá sáré bá wa ṣe.
So a máa ń rí ẹlòmíì tí ẹ pé wọ́n gbàbẹ̀ lọ tí ẹ pé ṣọ́ọ̀kì yẹn bó ṣe ṣẹlẹ̀ ti pọ̀ jù fún wọn. Àdè máa ń rí ẹlòmíì tí ẹ pé nǹkan tí wọ́n fi ń ṣe tó fi ń lọ sí ilé ìgbọ̀nsẹ̀, right, àti bàjẹ́ níbi tí wọ́n ti ń fi abẹ lóríṣiríṣi. Àdè ti rí àwọn cases ẹ pé tó bá yẹ pé wọ́n line up àwọn ọmọ ni àrùn tí ọmọ A bá ní, ọmọ kọ́kọ́ wọlé bá ní, tó bá yẹ pé àwọn mẹ́wàá ló fẹ́ ṣe pé wọ́n dábẹ́ fún, gbogbo wọn náà ló máa ṣe kíni, ló máa kó àrùn yẹn bí àtòrí abẹ tí wọ́n ń lò. Right, so oríṣiríṣi ẹ̀ láti rí, apart from pé a tún ti rí bó ṣe máa affect bí obìnrin náà ṣe ń ronú, ó lè má lè bá ọkọ ní àjọṣepọ̀ lọ́nà tí yẹ pé á dùn mọ́ òun náà, right, ó lè jẹ́ pé nǹkan oṣù láti jáde gan á ṣe kí ni o, á nira, á di wàhálà fún. So oríṣiríṣi nǹkan báyìí ni àti rí, gẹ́gẹ́ bí mo lè sọ ní àkọ́kọ́ pé about 85% of cases tí ó máa ń cause vesical vaginal fistula, àti rí pé some of them pé à ń dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin ló ṣe kí ni o, ló fà.
All right, you were talking about reconstructive surgery the other time because some people had been mutilated and there's nothing. Okay, maybe reconstruction will be what we can do now, the option. Of course, the harm had been done. So let's talk about reconstruction. So what ray of hope is there for those who have undergone female genital mutilation?
Okay, so for those who also live in very advanced economies, we've also seen that several of them have not even gone out to make this kind of requests, right? Again, because of the psychological damage, they rather keep quiet about it, bear the pain. Not because they don't have a healthcare facility close by where you have specialists who can possibly tend to their concern. How much more on a continent like Africa, where we're even talking about basic healthcare, right? So people still die here from malaria, from typhoid. Right, so it's not even on the menu yet to start talking about reconstructive surgery for a reproductive system. However, the truth is that it's just like someone who was amputated, right, and then got a prosthesis. Would you walk again? Yes. Would the psychology be the same? A lot of work would have to be done on that. So even if you have that reconstruction, I know we have an organization, a global organization that is currently supporting with building a reconstruction center in Port Harcourt. I think they got on that about 2 or 3 years ago. And the idea is that, look, how do we make sure that our medical professionals around here even have that information? They can even do this practice, and then they can support as many women as possible with it. So 2 phases to this is that, look, you have the organs back. The clitoris is back, reconstructed, the labia is back, or if it's fibrillation, you have been defibrillated, right? So it's now open, to ensure that, urination, menstrual flow happens at the usual pace. So even after that happens, how do you also now, talk about making sure that those organs can actually give the kind of pleasure they were meant to give? So again, science.
Mr. Fagurosi,
yes.
Is it possible during reconstruction to have the clitoris?
Yes, so that's what we're saying in terms of medical practice. This is very recent. This is less than some 10 years, because what bodies that have been walking around this found out was that, look, even the doctors who wanted to go into that field of specialty didn't find enough literature. Right? Why patients also, if you go online, for example, trying to find that similar information, they also did not find, where are the centers, for example, that you go to. If you walk into any hospital in Nigeria today and say you want to do a reconstructive surgery for this, it's not likely you get the kind of attention. Even if you do and you have the resources, right? How do you ensure that, that medical professional also has that skill? Right, because it's not something also in high demand. It's not gynecology, for example, that look, we are sure that every woman will come in here for one concern or the other, or general, medicine, general practice, in medicine as well. So it's a new field, but there's massive, progress being actually made around this, and the hope is that look, as many women who want to get, whole, quote and unquote, again, would actually be able to do this. But again, there's also the, the sexual therapy that happens around this. For several individuals, we have professionals who also will say, look, that is not only the sensitive part of the body. How do you ensure that during foreplay, for example, the woman gets in the mood, to ensure that she also enjoys, conjugal bliss with her partner. So it's a new area, but a lot of progress is currently being made at the moment, and Nigeria is also lucky to be one of those locations where a center is currently being put up for this purpose.
For this purpose. Now, your piece of advice to those who need help.
Okay, so Nigeria has, the highest number of girls and women that have been mutilated, about 20 million, right? Girls and women in Nigeria have been mutilated. So for individuals, for example, one of the things they need to do very clearly is to have conversations about this. Unlike the male reproductive organ, you can see it outside. The female reproductive organ is even inside. Sometimes when we go into communities to talk, we have people who say, I'm not sure whether I have it or not, whether my clitoris is still there or not, whether I was caught or not. Let me go back home and ask. And then they come back and say, wow, sorry, I found this out and all of that. What do I do and all of that? And one of the things we always say is that you need to see a medical professional, right? You need to see a gynecologist. You need to see those who actually have specialty around it, so that they can look at you and access, the extent of damage. And that's why we say women need to always go for antenatal care. You don't wait until the point when, you're about to deliver, and then that's when they realize that.
International Day of Zero Tolerance to Female Genital Mutilation is a annual awareness day that is used to commemorate ending the practice of female.
We just went to see the Olola, in whose name, right? And again, also for media platforms as well, we also say that look, we want, we crave your support to, keep amplifying this. Put a jingle out there. You are a community radio station, right? To serve, this. Put a jingle out there to say, look, we need to make sure that people actually have this information. We have too many problems around here to even now start battling a girl child being caught. Adding that, on top of the several other health-related complications we have in the first place. So let's stay on the end of preventive medicine. Let's stay on the end of preventing this from happening, so that we don't even have to talk about reconstructive surgeries.
So let's see how we bring it to level 0 when we talk about female genital mutilation. Mr. Fagurusi, it's been a pleasure having you around. We really enjoyed this session with you, and we do hope that when next we invite you for matters like this, you will be here.
Hopefully.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so much as well.
We've had the pleasure of Mr. Sholafa Gurusi, the Executive Director of Onelife Initiative, and he also came on behalf of the Child Protection Network, Ibadan. Today we've talked about female genital mutilation, and that's it on our midweek focus segment on Midweek Ride today.
ẹ ṣeun o ònìyàn ṣe ọlọ́bẹ̀ ṣogbó ẹni tẹ́ bá fi fẹ́ bá ètò yìí lọ ẹ̀sùn ẹ̀kọ́ àìbínú o ọ̀gbẹ́ni Ṣọlá Fagurusi àdúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ àwọn náà pé a pè wọ́n sì jẹ́ wa lórí ètò Midweek Ride fún tọ̀sẹ̀ yìí. Eré gbogbo tún di ọ̀sẹ̀ tí ń bọ̀, lágbára Elédùmarè tẹ́ ó tún láǹfààní àti pàdé wa lórí ètò Midweek Ride. Olúwadámiláre lèmi jẹ́, Andrew bàbá tó bí mi lọ́mọ ọmọ balógun ọ̀run gbogbo ayé ń pè mí. Títí ọ̀sẹ̀ tó ń bọ̀ ń gọ́ ẹ má jẹ́ adábẹ́ fún àwọn ọmọ wa obìnrin mọ́. Ire o.
Thank you very much. My name is Fuluke Owolabi. Next week we hope to have the Valentine's edition.
Ife.
My name is Fuluke Owolabi. Do enjoy the rest of the day and see you next week.
Sports, interviews, documentaries, music, and much more. Diamond 101.1 FM, promoting values and excellence. Community relation of the world. FM News on UI Radio. Diamond 101.1 FM.
Buhari approves establishment of polytechnic in Oyo. Oyo recruits 5,000 teachers, orders immediate resumption. Car opposition pulls out of parliamentary polls. Good afternoon, welcome to Diamond FM News Update at noon. My name is Fuluke Owolabi. President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the establishment of a federal polytechnic in Ayede, Ogoluwa local government area of Oyo State. Buhari also approved the sum of 2 billion naira from the resources of the Tertiary Education Trust Fund for the immediate takeoff of the polytechnic. This was stated by Presidential aide Bashir Ahmad, who said the approval was confirmed by the Ministry of Education. The president had also approved the establishment of a federal polytechnic in Shandam, Plateau State. The federal government has pledged its commitment to improving revenue generation and enhancing economic competitiveness in the country. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, made the pledge on a virtual platform on Monday during the Executive Roundtable on the Finance Act 2020 and the Economic Outlook for 2021, organized by PricewaterhouseCoopers. In her opening remarks, she said the federal government of Nigeria will continue to champion economic policies aimed at improving revenue generation, enhancing economic competitiveness, encouraging domestic investors, and enhancing macroeconomic stability despite the significant challenges posed by COVID-19. Chief Economist Dr. Andrew Nevin said Nigeria had a populace of intellectuals earning foreign exchange, which should be leveraged on. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, has said that COVID-19 vaccines are important for the safety of Nigerians. During a sensitization meeting with leaders of the Christian Association of Nigeria, Mustafa said nobody is safe from being infected with COVID-19 until everyone is vaccinated. Mustafa, who is the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, urged religious bodies to enlighten their members on the benefits and efficacy of vaccines against the pandemic. He said the COVID-19 pandemic is the most significant global public health emergency of this generation. Senator Kabiru Gaya said Nigeria must learn from the US election by putting in place structures to ensure free, fair and credible 2023 general elections. Gaya, also chairman Senate Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission, said this while speaking at a news forum in Abuja. He said that the National Assembly Joint Committee on INEC and Electoral Matters will strive towards presenting an electoral bill that will ensure free, fair and credible elections in the country. Gaya advised the US government to stay firm to prevent demonstrators from heating up the polity. The Oyo State government has commenced the distribution of appointment letters to the 5,000 newly recruited teachers under the State Teaching Service Commission. The chairman, Oyo State Teaching Service Commission, Pastor Akinade Alamu, who made the disclosure on Tuesday in Ibadan, said that the new teachers are to resume their duty posts immediately.